This video today is on how employers can get the credits related to COVID-19. I want it now, and this is real important. A small business employer, I'm going to show you today a way that you can get an advance payment for the credit related to the employee retention credit, the qualified sick leave pay, and also for the Expanded Family and Medical Leave Act. In the prior video, I said what is Form 7200 and kind of how it works. I went through the instructions. Today, with now updated through April 10th, I'm going to now do a live example and show you how that we can use Form 7200. And we look here at Form 7200, just as a refresher, it's an advance payment on employer credit due to COVID-19. First thing, as a quick overview, this is a new form. We're still getting updates and inputs. But most important thing for this, normally in order to get credits on payroll as an employer, you have to wait till the end of the quarter or at the end of the year. In this case, I'm going to show you how that even at the end of every single payroll, you may want to do a 7200. In my example today, I'm going to show you what might happen in the real world with a biweekly payroll employer. Could be one employee. It could be as long as it's under 500 to comply. With that, I need to set it up. So what I'm going to do today in this example is we're going to have an employer that paid on April 10th, and they're then going to pay again on April 24th. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to complete a Form 7200 for the payroll period ending April 10th. And when we get done with that form, we'll be able to fax it in. Then whenever we get 2 weeks from now to April 24th, we're going to do another 7200 in this session and then send it in. So I'm literally going to walk you through a live employer, you and I together. So as we do this, I also have to say that when we get to the numbers, what is the employer retention credit? We're going to make an assumption my number has already been calculated. What is the payroll deposit? That's already a given. And then we're going to work that through. And again, number one, we're going to do payroll period 410 with a 7200. I'm going to show you how you have to accumulate those numbers on the second form 2 weeks from now on the 7200, and then we'll file it. Then I'm going to come back and change one factor and redo the payroll period for 410 and 424. What I'm going to do there is I'm going to add a second credit. Let's go. And I've assumed that you watched the videos on employer retention credit. I assume that you've already watched the one on qualified sick leave and on the extended family and medical pay. That's how you keep track of your payroll and do the numbers. All right, let's get started. Looking here at Form 7200, the advance payment of employer credit due to COVID-19, what's going to happen is this information here is, for the most part, you can fill that out. But the important thing I want to stop is right here. See, what happens is we have 3 quarters. Notice there is not quarter number 1. And if you do the reading on the advanced credit dealing with the employer retention credit, it started on March 13th. I got some inquiries on what do I do with the fact that the Form 7200 does not have a first quarter, but yet I've got this credit that started in March. What happens is I'm going to show you on this form how we're going to include that here. Now, normally, if you don't file a 7200, any credit related to March 13th through the 31st will end up on your 941. And for today's discussion, let's assume you're doing a 941 report. All the 940s qualify for this, but let's assume we're doing a 941. So if we don't, I'm going to turn this over. If we don't do a 7200, what will happen is we'll get this credit on our second payroll report for any employment that's qualified wages for the employee retention credit from March 13th. But let's get back to the program. If I now look at part 1, it says check the box for the employment tax form that you're going to file. So today I'm going to check box number 1. It's a 940. Line B, part 1, it says, is this a new business on January 1st? And right now for this, I'm going to say no. It says if you say yes, though, then you should skip C. But the important thing here, you only skip C if you have not filed. So it says, unless you've already filed a 940, and again, for today, 941. Here's why. When we fax the 7200 in, what they're going to do is they're going to see and refer back to your most recent 941. You're a new business, but you filed first quarter. Then you're going to go ahead and not skip because you now have a 940 out there. And that's the reason for this question. Then part 1, line C, is the amount reported on line 2 of the most recent filed 941. As you know, you, the employer, or whoever does your payroll, knows that line 2 is gross wages. So we'll put a number X in here. And then it says part 1, line D. We're going to put in number of employees. We're going to put in X for the number of employees. At this point in time, pretty straightforward. But what we're now going to move into is how to get this credit now. So with that, what I've kind of do, we're going to go to part 2. But for part 2, what I've done is kind of enlarge this, one, so it's better seen on the screen, and number 2 is I have a bigger box to write in. So as I said in the introduction, for right now, make an assumption that what I put on here is qualified wages, qualified credits, etc. So here's what I'm going to do in example number 1. So this is for 4/10 of 20. Now, as we start down through part 2, we're now going to have to go back to our payroll records. And at this point in time, in reading all the instruction and what's going on, and we have to retain these records, as we did in a prior video, informed you, we have to save these records for 4 years. So here's what I'm going to say. When in doubt, document, document, document. First thing let's do, let's look at part 2, line 1. Look in here, it says total employee retention credit. So that's the credit that a lot of times referred to the ERC. And in our given for this period, it says the credit. Well, I'm going to have a given of $5,000. Now, line 2 is what it's the question is, what is our qualified sick leave wages eligible for the credit in this quarter? And I think I'm going to stop here because line 1 also says for this quarter. Line 2 says for this quarter. So right now, this is our first pay period because we're on April 10th. This is biweekly. So this is our first pay period in April. We could have some, in this case here, we could have some employee retention credit available from March. So we would include that on line 1. But then on line 2, what's qualified sick leave wages? And right now, let's go and look at the next line, total qualified family leave wages. And then when we get down here to line 4, we're going to add them up. I don't know I've ever seen where we're adding credits and wages together. Little confusing. And that's why I said at the end of this presentation, I'm actually going to have how these 3 come about. But for the calculation right now, the sick leave wages, see there, we get 100% of the qualified wages. For the family leave, we get 100% of the qualified wages. Whereas on line 1, for the employee retention credit, we get 50% of qualified wages. So on this line, it's 50% of wages that are qualified. On this line, it's 100% of wages qualified. And here is 100%. So that's the reason why on line 1, we have a credit. It's 50% of qualified wages. Line 2 is 100% credit of qualified wages. Line 3 is 100% of qualified wages. Now stay tuned. Some of you may say at this point in time, what's those other numbers, the 230, etc. We'll cover that in the summary at the end. So for this example, as I said in the beginning, let's just do one credit because I want to show you how this accumulates every time we file a 7200. And remember, we can file as many 7200s as we want to, but if one of them is wrong, we cannot amend it. It will be reconciled at the end of the quarter on the 941. And that's another question I've got in some of my prior videos. So now what we're going to do, looking back here at the form, we're going to add it up. So we got line 2 is 0, line 3 is 0, and line 4 is $5,000. So the next thing we're going to do, line 5, the total amount by which you already reduce your federal employment taxes. In this case, in this payroll period, first period, we had a total liability of $3,500. So I'm going to put the $3,500 in here. it says total advance credit requested on previous filings. Again, the reason why I picked April the 10th and doing it biweekly is the fact there's been no pay period in April. So the answer to line 6 is 0 because we've not previously asked for anything. So then we go to line 7 and it says what? Add 5 and 6, 3,500. So that's the amount we're telling the IRS when we get to the end of the quarter on the 941 that we want, instead of making a deposit to our payroll, what we want to do is we want to take this credit. Line 8, advance request. Subtract line 7 from line 4. If 0 or less, do not fill it out. This is only get that advance credit. In our case, line 8 is $1,500. At this point in time, we're ready to go back over to the form, but before we switch over to the form for a second, I want to recap part 2. So what we've done is we've said we had qualified credit, qualified wages of $5,000. We had a payroll liability of $3,500. So we would like to have this $1,500 back. And what we're going to find out, we're going to fax this form in. Now at this point in time, matter of fact, just before I started this presentation, I actually looked on irs.gov. I looked through some of the software, tax software research material I have, and stay tuned, but it appears to be they're assuming that this refund will be through the normal channels, through your bank account. In some cases, it may be by mail. Stay tuned. Just one of those places where I guess I should say subscribe to our channel, because when it updates, then you'll be able to get a notice on that. So again, we're going to get that $1,500 credit, and I'm now going to pull the $7,200 back over here. And the reason why is that we've completed part 2. We're asking again for $1,500, and in that, somebody's going to sign it, and down here, we're going to fax in at this fax number the report we just did. We are now done with payroll April 10th, and we want $1,500. See, this is to get the money now so it can help us with payroll. Let's go 2 weeks in advance from now, and we're now going to go to a payroll period of April 24th. Now, please, this one here, you got to stay with me, because what I'm going to do is on this form, and I'm doing this for example purposes, but we're going to go to 4/24/20. I'm going to put on here, do not file. Don't file this. But for this period, what we ended up with is we're going to have an employee retention credit in this period. And if we look here at the form, line 1, $7,000. In doing that, and I'm just making a memo of this, what happens is I also, what's the other factor I need? I need what our employer liability is. And in this case, for this 2-week period, is $4,000. This is the numbers we have from our payroll information for the pay period ending 4/24. Stay with me. I think you'll see why I did this. So what I'm now going to do is slide this form over, and I'm going to take the form we just did and lay it right beside it, and then underneath it. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to say this is form 4/24/20. So what the instructions say is that, again, I can file this as many times as I want to. It's not required to file it. And in our first pay period over here, we saw we had 1,500 positive. If line 8 is 0 or negative, do not file the form. So we faxed that in 2 weeks ago. Here is our current pay period. So what it says, it's that it's the accumulation of, and this is how they're going to track us. So now is that on this report, what is our year to, or I should say, what's our quarter to date credits that are available? Well, our quarter to date is the 5,000 plus the 7,000, or we're going to have here 12,000. Okay. We have 0 on our sick leave wages. So we got 0 this period. So that's going to be 0 over here. I should put another 0 here to make that 12,000. Let's go to line 3, qualified family leave wages. In our first pay period, we had 0. In this pay period, we have 0 qualified wages. So that's going to be 0. So now what we're going to do is we're going to total that number that is $12,000. And if we look at our line 5, remember that that's the amount by which we've already reduced it. So in the first pay period, we asked for $3,500. In the pay period for the 2 weeks ending April 24th, we're asking for $4,000. So our total here is $7,500. Now, this is a new line, and that is line 6, total advance credits requested on previous filings. Well, if I look back on my previous filing here, I asked for $1,500. So I'm going to take that $1,500 off line 8, and I'm going to put it here on this second $7,200 of $1,500. So at this point in time, I'm done with references to the old $7,200. I'm ready to come back here. So up to now, we've said review. Part 2, line 1, it's what was our employee retention credit for the quarter. We now are up to $12,000. We did not have any of the other 2 credits that we can get advance payments on Form 7200. So line 4 is $12,000. Again, line 5, that has been from our 2 pay periods, our total quarterly, again, this is all based on quarter, that we've asked them to reduce our federal taxes based on having employee credits. Previously, we've asked for $1,500. So what that does is that gives us a total on line 7, the total of line 5 and 6 of $9,000. Now what we're going to do, line 8, the advance request, we're going to say line 7 from line 4, on this pay period, we're going to ask for $3,000. As you can see here, to step back, here is the report we did on 10/4. We had $5,000 qualified in credit, $3,500 we're asking them to use of the 5 for a $1,500 refund. So then we go to, we had the period of the new qualifying for the year, or for the pay period, and we're going to add that to what is, again, every one of these lines, quarter, quarter, quarter. See, we keep filing 7200s as many times as we want to during the quarter. But once we get at the end of the quarter, then what's going to happen is we're going to file a 941 report for you, the employer, and at that point in time, when we get into July, we're going to start over. So this is quarter by quarter. In this case, what's going to happen is again, we're going to ask for $3,000. If we would go out here to the next pay period, what we do is do the exact same thing as we've done. Again, I've taken you through 2 pay periods. I've showed you how to accumulate it. You fax the one in on 4/10, on 4/24, you can fax this one in for your additional credit. In the introduction, I mentioned that we were going to be doing another set of 7200s, but I wanted to take the same fax, the same employer, you the employer, we want to add one more credit. Now in our given, I'm going to write in, and again, where we start at, this here's payroll period for 4/10/20. We're going to file this report, we're going to fax it. In the prior one, in the first quarter, we had here on line 1, total employee retention credit. I'll put the same thing as we had in example 1 of $5,000. But here's the only variable difference. If we look at line 2, it says qualified sick leave wages eligible for the credit. So again, wages, in this period we had $1,000. To point out why line 1 is a credit, as I explained in example 1, and line 2 and 3 is wages, is in line 1, the employee retention credit is based on 50% of qualified wages. In line 2 and line 3, it's based on 100% dollar for dollar of qualified wages. Like I mentioned before, very unusual to be adding credits and wages to get to a number, but we're going to do that. Then line 3, total family leave wages is 0. Line 4, what's the total of line 1, 2, and 3? It's $6,000. So now we have another $1,000 available for credit. Line 5 that was in our given in example 1, I'll mark this example number 2. So in line 5, our liability, we're going to leave it the same as in example 1, $3,500. Line 6, advanced credit requested on previous filing. Because this is our first payroll in April, we wouldn't have asked for anything in the prior. So that's going to be a total of 0. And then on line 7, if we look there, what we're going to do on line 7, we're going to add 5 and 6 together for $3,500. Line 8 is the advance request. It's going to be the difference in line 7 and 4 are $2,500. So this is going to be the credit we're going to fax in and request. And we, like I said, we can do this immediately. Remember in example 1, it was $1,500. So there shows you this additional 1,000 ends up in increasing our request. So now let's go to pay period number 2. As I did in example 1, I'm going to say do not file. And this is pay period 4/24/20 numbers. And what was in our old set of numbers was we had, I believe, the employee retention credit was $7,000 in example 1. Also in example 1, we had a payroll liability in this pay period of $4,000. So as we did in the prior one, I'm going to put these two together. And what we're going to end up with, I'm going to slide this under here. So what we're going to end up with, we're going to take the 5 from the first refundable credit form 7200 we requested. We're going to add, because it's quarter to date, we're going to add the 5 to the 7, and we're going to get $12,000. Then we're going to come back and look. We had 1,000 and we have 0. So year to date, we have 1,000. Line 3 has been 0. In this pay period, we were 0. So we're going to have 0 here. So now line 4, and I'm going to remove this. Well, I better not. Let's go and do this. Line 4 is $13,000. Line 5 is the total amount we've already reduced our federal taxes by. So in the first period, we did $3,500, plus now we're going to do $4,000. And in doing that, we've got a total of $7,500. Line 6, it says the advanced credit we had done on previous filings. If I look at previous filings, we requested $2,500. So I'm going to put $2,500 here. Let's look, complete in our form. Again, from the periods in this quarter, we've now offset our $13,000 credit by $7,500, plus we had a prior advance credit of $2,500 off our prior $7,200. So now we're going to have a total of $10,000. Our advance request now is going to be the difference in 4 and 7, or $3,000. Now let's see our proof, because what happened was, if I can find my sheet here, our credit for the second period, and I should label this 4/24/20. This is the example 2, and this is example 1. My point here is we asked for this additional $1,000 for our sick leave pay. That was refunded to us on the first $7,200. But we had to pull all the numbers forward quarter to date, and that's why all these keep saying quarter. But if you notice, is for this pay period, we got the same credit refunded. So kind of in summary of example 1 and 2, example 1, I tried to show you, we took one credit and put it in multi-pay periods. So each pay period we had that credit, and that was the employee retention credit. Then what I did is in example 2, as I learned, I guess in cooking, if you got a pot of chili, you don't, if the seasoning doesn't taste just right, you don't add 3 or 4 different seasonings, you change it by one to see the outcome. And so that's what we did here today, was in the first pay period, we had that $1,000 sick leave wage. We put that in there. We got that credit benefit. It went from $1,500 to $2,500 in form 7200 in that pay period. 2 weeks later, we filed another form. And in that case, we had the exact same information in pay period number 2, and our requested advance credit was the same. I think that's kind of a recap of filing the form. Now, the one last thing that I did promise you when I started this video was the fact of, in reading instructions, and stay tuned again, I believe they're going to put out some more instructions for what's happening, but this is based on current instructions. And the other thing is that if you go online for the 941 right now, you will not find any place on the first quarter 941 where it says that you can put this credit. And that's why I was getting questions on my prior video, was the fact of what do I do with this, employee retention credit when it started on March 13th. What I've done here for you is I've done a recap of the instructions and tried to help explain it now that you've actually seen the numbers. So Form 7200, instruction explained, the numbers accumulate per quarter. We saw that in example 1 and example 2. Going down the left side of the column, Form 7200, part 2. So we're going to enter a credit. Well, line 1 was the employee retention credit. How do we get that number? If it starts again in March 13th, but if we're under 100 full-time employees, you count all employees, whether they're furloughed, whether they're providing services, etc. If they're over 100 but under 500, then there's certain limits. Generally, the full-time employees that are working, you won't qualify for that. But again, I tried to summarize this. Why are we getting the credit? We're trying to keep our employees. The purpose, again, is to retain where we are either fully or partly shut down. So whenever a governor says, okay, restaurants, you can have carryouts, well, that is partially shut down. Or if you are not in an area that government has either fully or partially shut you down, it's in any quarter that your sales are down by 50% per quarter. Again, sales 50% per quarter, and you look at 2019 and compare to see. How do I get the refund? Well, you normally are going to get it on your 940 something, but if you want an advance credit, as we did in this video, then what happens is you're going to do it on Form 7200. What's qualifying wages? It's 50% of qualifying wages paid in that quarter. And then the limit, it's limited to $10,000 in qualified wages or a credit of $5,000 per employee per year. So that's line 1. Let's go to line 2, Form 7200 Part 2, and we've got qualified sick leave wages there. Well, that started, as you can see here, that started on April the 1st. Also, I might note that you include health insurance and the employer's share of the Medicare taxes. The credit is for emergency paid sick leave. I did a earlier video. You probably looked below for a link to that. Matter of fact, I did one for employee retention credit. I did one for qualified sick leave, did one for family leave. But let's continue on down. It's because they're unable to work related to COVID-19. Again, you still get it on your 940s, or as we did today, you would get this on the 7200 after a pay period. And it's 100% of qualified wages, and it's limited to 80 hours. Again, I'm not going to go through every one of these. Qualified wages here is 100% of the quarantine order, doctor seeking diagnostics, or it's 2/3 of the qualified wages for carrying somebody that has the virus. That's why I said in looking at line 2 on Part 2, Form 7200, where it says wages, it's because it's 100% of qualified wages. Here it's 2/3, but whatever number you come up with is actually for the form qualified wages. The limit here, I've got the limits here, is if it's during the 80-hour period, you're limited to $511 a day or 10 days, which would total up to 80 hours or $51.10 per employee per year. Qualified wages limit on 80 hours would be $2,000 per employee per year. Again, I don't want to get too far down deep in it, but this is a really good recap. Line 3, the qualified family leave wages start April the 1st, and they include also health insurance and Medicare taxes. It's the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act related to COVID-19, same forms, and here it's 2/3 of qualified wages caring for the child. The child has to be under the age of 18. The limit here is $200 a day for 2 weeks, or a total of $10,000 total per employee per year. A reminder, as we saw in my overview video that you can see the link below, you cannot double deduct. And where do we get that? You can't double deduct. For example, if you use payroll under the employee retention on line 1, you then cannot use it on line 2 or 3. It would not qualify. Or if you use the employee retention credit, if you're looking at the paycheck payroll program or paycheck protection program, you can't use it over there. So again, please go to the video in the comparison of the employee retention credit versus the payroll or the paycheck protection program. I hope this has helped you through and navigate. At our office, we already have people that are applying for this credit in advance. Again, this whole video was how to get my money now. I want to thank you. Future updates, I can tell you, like for example, there's some over here in the employee retention credit. I think we're going to see some more guidance there. So if you'd like to subscribe so we can update you as this progresses forward, I hope to do so, and I hope to see you in the future. Thank you.